Yeah, so kind of staying on topic, I've got another article from Yahoo Finance talking about what will everything look like after the coronavirus. And so this is kind of a theme we're seeing in a lot of different articles, of course. But yeah, they talked about some changes that we all kind of know might happen, but I wanted to kind of pontificate on them a little bit. Talked about how, for example, airlines probably aren't going to recover ever to the same level that they were before because there's a lot of stigma about that it feels like it feels like a very susceptible industry to this kind of problem. It talked about how independent restaurants were likely to be shut down as a result of this because it's hard for them to stay open during this time, but that fast food might have the cash to kind of weather that storm. Talked about how drive-through movies are kind of making a resurgence in some areas as people are trying to find ways to kind of revitalize the entertainment industry in this new sort of world that we're in. And so there was a few other interesting things. It said that like virtual concerts were raising in popularity quite a bit, and so people are like watching their favorite singers, via their phones. But then there were a few things that I brought up that I thought were maybe a little humorous. But they had like they said that Walmart had been selling more tops than it had been selling bottoms because everyone's trying to go to these Zoom meetings, and so they just want to look presentable from the waist up, and that popsicle stick sales, I guess, are through the roof because everyone is at home trying to do crafts with their kids, trying to play teacher. And so I guess I just wanted to kind of think out loud here about how different industries are going to react and what industries might be, in danger once this whole thing blows over.
I gotta admit, when I first saw this article, I was thinking more along the lines, and something that I've been thinking about lately is like culturally or interactively how things are going to change after the virus. And I'm wondering, like the business handshake has always been like a really big thing, or in an introduction, I remember when you were going to job fairs or they were talking about job prep, how essential it was for a firm yet not overly aggressive handshake when you're making first contact with somebody and try and establish rapport, or like a company culture, how that would be changed through kind of like how the 6 foot rule, and how I guess how people before who were really concerned about handshakes or something like Howie Mandel, who was like considered like a germaphobe or something, was really considered, wow, that's like weird that he doesn't want to shake anybody's hand. But now probably people wouldn't bat an eye if somebody didn't want to shake hands with you. So I can see how like those small restaurants. One thing I didn't think of when you said small restaurants was like the intimacy of a restaurant and how everybody's kind of packed around anyway, and your server's really close to you and everybody's touching your food. But I didn't think of how the cash requirements and the small margins that those restaurants operate on, they probably can't sustain being shut for more than a couple weeks, and how that would. It's going to be interesting to watch, and I don't think we know the full ramifications, but I think for sure it's gone on long enough, and there's been enough of an impact that I think I don't think you'll ever look at a roll of toilet paper the same again, probably.
Yeah.
I think along those lines, we're very fortunate that the nature of our work and the access to technology we have allows us to work from home. But I think about, you probably have all seen this, the reports and the discussions of people talking about how they have all this, here's what to do with your extra time, right? There's a lot of discussion about, since you're at home, to keep you from getting bored or to keep you from going crazy, here's what you can be doing with your extra time to develop yourself or to prepare for what comes next, kind of thing. And I look at that and I'm like, who are these broad swaths of people that they're talking about that are sitting at home with, I'm definitely at home, but I'm very busy. I've been just totally booked morning till night throughout this. And so, but I think it speaks to the fact that it speaks to how fortunate we are to be able to continue our work from home, and that there is such a large portion of the population that are in service and other kinds of jobs that really so far heretofore have required that they be at the job location to actually do anything. And so now you've got a large portion of the population that actually is at home and doesn't necessarily have anything to do without their job being available to them. It's just a different it's a different perspective that I don't have. That's interesting to think about.
Yeah, I gotta say, I gotta second that, because there and a couple of other people call me about some of their free time, and I just think to myself, I have no idea what that's like, because I feel, there's always so much thing on. But like you said, it's a blessing to be able to, do that from home and to not have that fear right now at this moment. And yeah, but I second that.
I have a friend that actually works in Detroit in metal fabrication, and he took a voluntary leave. And he was in a fortunate enough position where he had money saved, where he was able to relinquish his job and allow somebody else to stay at work that really needed it. And he is one of those that is receiving unemployment and literally has nothing to do all day. And so I see him pop online on Xbox all day long, or if I look at him, he's been online for like 20 hours, So there is it, and a lot of his friends and colleagues and all that are in the same boat. So they're, I think with the exception of us that had kind of set ourselves up, I think everything's ground to a halt in those kind of I don't want to say manual labor, but those production jobs, those restaurant jobs, everything that's associated with. I mean, and you even think about Uber drivers where, they were afraid of automation. Now I'm wondering if the social stigma of being, in somebody's back seat would stop. Are people going to use public transportation after this is done? I can remember riding the Max and being elbow to elbow with everybody on there, during a rush hour. Are people going to take that same kind of risk now, or look at like close confined quarters of public transportation, or even an Uber the same way?
Yeah, and those get hit double, because not only, like you're saying, do you have the risk of being close to so many other people, but also nobody wants to go to work more because they can't, and because so they're not using Ubers, they're not using the bus as much as they were. So yeah, that's a tough industry to be in right now.
But I think about the changes in business and industry, like back to your kind of the core of your question too, AJ, that I was doing an interview today. It'll be out on the podcasts with doctors Kim and Todd Saxton out of Indiana. They are researchers in entrepreneurship and have written a book called The Titanic Effect. And they were talking about I was asking them a broad variety of issues related to their expertise and how it related to the current crisis. And one of the things that we were talking about was the leaps of progression and evolution that online education, them being professors, that was something at the top of their mind. And also doing medical assessments and some sorts of counseling via webcast, like what we're doing here, or during videocast. Both online education and certain kinds of medical diagnoses or counseling sessions via webcast are examples of areas where the technology has already been available for a while, and there was a very slow moving trend to go that direction. But this whole crisis is like pushing that trend forward by years, right? It's like it's going to jump years in terms of, because when you think about it, just think about like, we've all been to university, so we can speak to that issue, that if you just think about that there's more and more been people taking classes online. That's been a steady progression. A lot of people it was already the case, a lot of people would do at least some of their coursework online, but now everyone's doing all of their coursework online, presumably, for the next few months. And so I think there's a question there of, okay, now that we've made that leap, do we backtrack? Or if we get to the point where we don't have to do so much social distancing, is that leap now done? Is it the case that a much bigger portion of education forevermore will be done online going forward now, and that this situation pushed that forward in that particular industry? And yeah,
it feels that way to me. I mean, only time will tell, but it definitely seems to be going that way from everything that I can tell. And because I think that once people get used to it, and once people just start to learn to live that way, then it'll become part of their nature more than it had been in the past.
And I continue to think, what does that mean for us and in professional services, where we could deliver a lot of our consulting and do a lot of our stuff online or through, especially finance related. even though the technology has been available, it's an industry where people didn't necessarily want to do that kind of stuff online. Companies and individuals, they like looking somebody in the eye, and the trust of doing that in an online format hasn't been quite there yet, I think, across the broad spectrum. And are we going to see that this is moving that forward dramatically in a way that never goes back the other direction as well?
Yeah, I thought when you and I, Ty, were first talking about like kind of the social implications of this, I thought, if it, I think I was naive to think that, well, this will be over in a couple of weeks and then nobody will have learned a lesson from this, or nobody will have changed their attitudes. But as this has gone on, I think it's going to take a long time to kind of get back to, I don't think you can get back to where we were before as far as people's mindset, but I definitely think it's gone on long enough where this will have permanent ramifications in how people interact in society and how businesses are delivered and what businesses are deemed, essential, I think, and which businesses
Right.
survive this,
It really does bring up this it really does raise this question: what does being essential mean? And for those businesses that at the moment are not necessarily considered essential, or maybe they don't think they're considered essential, or maybe their customers don't necessarily think they're essential. That was another topic that I was talking with the professors out of Indiana about, and they use this term that I love about kind of the value void, and the challenge those businesses have right this minute is figuring out how to recast their value in a way that makes it essential, right? Don't get, and I think my natural inclination, like where my mind goes on this is, oh, if I'm in an unessential industry, or if my business is deemed through this process to be somewhat unessential at the moment, maybe I should be pivoting to entirely new industries that are looking like they're essential. But I think what I came out of that discussion with the professors being inspired about is, or maybe you figure out how to restate your value proposition in a way that makes it essential. It doesn't necessarily demand a wholesale change in your business. It just demands a difference in how you it may demand some pivots in your business, but also in how you communicate and articulate to people why your business is more essential than they think it is.
Well, I think even to piggyback off that, I think that this time, if you're sitting there unemployed, or if you're sitting there in something that has been deemed an unessential business, I think this is a great time to, like you said, reevaluate how to deliver that value proposition, or evaluate where you can be an essential business and where you can try to recession-proof yourself. I mean, to use my own experience personally, during the Great Recession of 2007-ish, that's how I became an accountant, was because I was out of business as a contractor, and I Googled the lowest unemployment rates, and lawyer was up there. I was like, ooh, CPA was up there as like a third. So I was like, well, how hard can that be? Does that sound interesting? And that's actually how I got into accounting.
That's
so,
fun. Yeah. Honestly, that was another big thing that got me into it too, was just like wanting to have job stability. And so, yeah, I think it's just a really good chance for everybody to look at what they do and think about how can we make ourselves not appear more essential, but market our services as an essential service, or is it time to think about something new in this new environment that we're in?